welcome to ADHD Friendly. It's episode 100. 100. All right. So this whole episode is dedicated to celebrating our 100th episode of ADHD Friendly. I'm Patty. I'm neglected to say that at the very top, but if you don't know, I'm Patty. I am the host of this podcast and the creator of the ADHD Friendly membership platform. I invite you to check that out at ADHDfriendly.com, where everything that we do is designed to tilt the playing field in favor of ADHD brains, so we're thriving. So today, episode 100, we're going to be celebrating. So I'm going to kick it off with the 100th episode celebration. Then I have an ADHD friendly tip I'm calling consistently inconsistent. I'll talk about that more in a minute. And then we have our first commercial. Our first commercial will be after the tip and before our main topic, which is around the 100th episode celebration. And the commercial, when you, if you hang out for the commercial, it's our first sponsor, and it's an I Love Lucy style commercial. So if you're an I Love Lucy fan, which I loved watching reruns of I Love Lucy growing up, and one of my absolute favorites is Vitamita Veg. So if that rings a bell for you, stay tuned for the commercial from our sponsor to check that out. And then the main topic today, I'm going to be sharing lessons I've learned from recording 100 episodes and launching a new episode every single week for 100 weeks in a row, which every time I say that, I'm like, what? I did, like, I'm not saying that literally to like, it's like, I don't really believe.
How did we get here?
Oh, it's crazy. So I'm going to share some lessons I've learned from that process. And then I'm going to share my top 10 list of 100 or top 10 list of episodes out of those 100, not in order of my, 10 down to one favorite, but just 10 episodes out of the 100 that were my favorites. And then I'm going to highlight some changes that are going to be coming as we move forward past episode 100. Let's jump in with the celebration. 100 episodes, Becca, we made it.
We did it.
100 episodes every Friday, 100 weeks in a row. If you had told me 2 years ago when we were just getting ready to launch, when I committed to doing 5 episodes just to see what I thought, because I was so overwhelmed, I wanted to do this forever. And I was so in my head about it, I kept getting overwhelmed and shut down. I was like, you know what, let me just commit to doing 5 episodes, and I'll say it right from the top of the first episode. And then it feels like I follow through with my intention, even if I stopped. So that felt very doable. Yes. And then I was like, oh, okay. I'm learning some things. It's not easy, but I'm getting there. So I'll just keep going. And here we are. So there's definitely been a lot of learning that's taken place in the last 100 episodes.
I say.
A lot of changes. I've had kind of like really slow subscriber numbers, and then they peaked like crazy over the course of a couple months, and now they've really plateaued. Luckily, I'm going down, but they've really plateaued. So as always, I'm always open to feedback. If there's something that I'm doing, you're just like, oh my gosh, Patty, it grates on my last nerve and I can't listen to you. If I can change it, gosh, I want to change it. If it's just me, I'm sorry. I'm really doing the best I can, and I'm sorry, but I acknowledge that, what I do isn't for everyone. And I'm doing this for the people that it does resonate with, because you're my tribe. You're who I'm really motivated to get the information out there to support. So Becca, I bought these poppers. So I know I've shared before, and Becca knows I do not like loud noises, and I do not like messes. So I'm not a glitter fan. I'm not a confetti fan. Oh my gosh. But I found these poppers online, and they're supposed to be quiet, and they're not supposed to make a mess. So we're going to try one. Becca, yours just like aim it so it'll come over. So I'm going to tell you the directions, which I have right here in front of me. Oh, here they are.
No.
So all you're supposed to do is run your finger through the wire ring on the confetti streamers, so you can slightly rotate the ring to hold it in place, and then carefully peel off the backing paper and hold it. Hold it well. Don't hold the ribbon. Don't let the ribbon fall before throwing. Raise your arms and throw them hard into the air like throwing a baseball. So
That was a good one.
Oh, did it work?
That was
Yeah.
a good one.
Okay. I was expecting it to like all shatter down.
I like that it doesn't
So,
make noise.
Here's the lovely thing about this. So we did one in our practice. Oh, look, they're like little rolls and they just keep on rolling. Oh, you guys,
Fantastic.
that's fun.
Yeah.
And it literally, that's all I have to do to clean it up. It keeps going and going. It's like a toilet paper roll.
Yeah,
It's done.
surprised they got that much in the ball.
I'll have to
itself.
see if I can add this to my Amazon store
That
on
was fun.
ADHDfriendly.com because it wasn't very loud. It was a
No.
little noise, but nothing. And it didn't make a mess. So I can literally just take this and throw it away instead of having a million little pieces of confetti everywhere. Or, oh my gosh, glitter. Oh, okay.
Glitter bomb.
All right. I dropped all of my notes. That's okay. I can easily retrieve them. That was pretty cool. So I just want to show the one roll. So apparently it's a bunch of tiny little rolls that when you throw it up in the air, it unravels and makes these streamers,
So
which is pretty cool. I don't
fun.
even remember how much this was because I bought it like a month ago. I don't think it was ridiculously expensive.
No, I'm sure not.
It was under $20, but I don't know. I want to say it was like, I don't know. We'll post it. Becca will put it in when
Yes.
she edits so that you guys can see how much it was. If that's something that interests you, if you're sensitive to loud noises, or just don't give me something else I have to clean,
Yeah.
please.
No.
So that checked all the boxes. All right. It was not the easiest to set up, but hopefully you can edit that to make it make
Yes.
sense. All right, moving on. Now to the ADHD friendly tip for this week. One of the really frustrating things about ADHD brains is we are consistently inconsistent. So we don't do things consistently except being inconsistent. So we're very consistent at being inconsistent. But that can be one of the most troubling things about ADHD because people will be like, well, I know you know how to do it. You've done it before. So now you must be choosing not to do it. Or I hate the L word. It is just one of those words that I try to resist using, but people will sometimes assume that we're lazy because we're not doing it. And
That's not
that's
fair.
not it. So my tip is to look into how I always want to like take what we struggle with and find ways to lean into it.
Yeah.
So if we struggle with consistency, how can we use that to our advantage? And so I'm just sharing this from when I was preparing for this episode. What I realized was I was very consistently inconsistent. Even though I consistently published a new episode every single Friday, that was the consistent part. What was inconsistent was everything else. I don't record on the same day. Becca doesn't edit at the same time.
Even your planning.
The planning is different. The structure has gone all over the place. The location, like I keep moving around where I record, where I plan. I move around all of like, I'm going to do this. And then Becca comes to like, and she's like, I thought this episode was blank. And I'm like, yeah, this came across my radar. And so I try to let myself be very inconsistent around everything else. As long as the episode is able to come out on schedule, I let go of holding myself to be consistent in all the other areas. And that might drive you crazy, but it has worked for me.
Yeah.
And I just thought I'd highlight that because I know it often is described and often is something that gets in our way. But what I want to share the tip being, look into what do you do inconsistently that allows you to be consistent? And is there some magic in that we can embrace and kind of shift the perspective from, oh my gosh, I'm always blah, 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 to, you know what? I do this and this and this really inconsistently, but the consistent result is this.
Yeah.
So look for ways that you are consistently inconsistent and lean into that is my tip. And if you've done that before, this resonates for you and you have an example, please, I'd love to, get some comments for other people to share and be able to connect with besides the ones that I'm sharing in the episode. So if there's something that worked for you that you can share, we all learn from each other. So please share it. All right. So for the first time, I don't think I said this in the overview, but Becca, we're going to have a commercial. This is the first episode 100. We're going to have a commercial. So we're going to pause here for a quick word from our sponsor. Hello, friends. I'm ADHD Friendly Girl. Are you overwhelmed, unmotivated, run down? Do you stop before you start? The answer to your challenges can be found at ADHD Friendly. ADHD Friendly is where where we make the doing easier. Join ADHD Friendly today and start tilting the playing field in favor of your ADHD brain and start thriving. ADHDfriendly.com, where intention meets action. Okay, now on with what I've learned over the 100 episodes of ADHD Friendly. So the first thing that I learned was I needed structure in terms of, I used to, when I first started recording, I was recording from my desk and I was typing up basically a rough script that I was reading on slides. And I kept getting feedback that I wasn't looking at the camera. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to look at the camera. Like literally the slides were on my computer. So it didn't make any sense to me that I wasn't looking at the camera, but apparently it looked like I wasn't connecting. So I had to figure out how to plan the episodes in a way that I would remember, because remember, I've always shared, like, I have weak working memory. So to expect myself to remember the different things I wanted to make sure I shared was not, that expectation wasn't going to be able to be met by my brain without structure and tools. So I created a podcast planning sheet, and this is evolved over the 100 episodes. It's changed multiple times. And this is my most updated one that I'm just showing. And again, if you're listening to this, I invite you to check out my YouTube channel, ADHD Friendly Podcast, to see any visuals that I do share. And I just had a commercial break for this one, because it was like that sparked like 100th episode. So this is the first time I've used this specific version of this planner, but it just holds the structure that I created, which was to start with a celebration. And then always, look for an ADHD friendly tool or tip that I could share, and then the main topic, and then just a quick recap. And then it has a whole like editing checklist that Becca and I use. So I remember what I need to do before I can give it to her. And then she has a checklist for what she does. So I can put little notes like, oh, remember to add a different episode number, or like in this case, the price for the poppers.
Yeah.
So, I'll kind of like make little notes and I'll write it on there. And that way, when she takes the materials to start editing, she doesn't have to worry about remembering what I said. Most of the time she's with me when I record live, so she doesn't have to be like, what did she say? So it just helps to support my brain and even Becca's brain to be able to do what we need to do. And so that was a lesson that I learned so far, has worked for me, and it's always evolving because I always tend to improve my systems as I use them, because I notice what would work even better. The other is we have a file box, which is just far too large. I was going to share it, but it's huge because it has all 100 episode notes in it, because I do go back and I reference my notes a lot for different things that I'm doing. And it's just a file box with 100 file folders in it, one for each episode. So I can always go back and remember, like, when did I share this? Because even though I keep track of the episode overview, just like, a bullet point of what was my celebration and what was my tool and what was the topic, I don't share all of the details or the planning information. So it tends to be, or the resources. So like I have like articles that I printed out that are saved in that one file folder. So if I want to bring that topic into something else I'm doing, I have all that material, so I don't have to reinvent the wheel. So I learned I really needed a way to keep track, because remember, we had like, they were kind of all over the place when I started, and there was no rhyme or reason to it. And it was one of those times where I was like, okay, Becca, like, you're really seeing my brain here. Without structure, I'm a hot mess. All over the place. And I was never able to find anything. It was very frustrating. So I found this really nice file box that I got nice hanging folders in, and we just label all of the episodes, and everything goes into, for that one episode, that one file. So if we need anything, we pull the one file and everything's there. So that has really worked well. As I mentioned just a minute ago, that structure, kind of defining, I'll start with the celebration, because it's just what we do when we have ADHD brains. We have to highlight positive things, and looking for that really supports my brain, because I'm like, oh, I need a celebration for this episode. I need it. So I'm always looking for things that I can highlight, and then looking for a tip or a tool. And then of course the main topic. I've also learned that podcasting, even with structure and even with all of this practice that we've now had 100 episodes of practice, it's very time consuming to do a podcast episode once a week. And we've got it down to a science where I take about 2 hours to plan episodes, takes about an hour or so I block to set up and record it. And I've gotten really good usually at recording it in one go. Which, may or may not be good. Like that might be one of the challenges is it's like, oh my gosh, maybe she's like, maybe I'm not professional enough because I'm not like able to constantly stop. I'm not good at stopping and starting. I'm kind of like, all right, once I go, I'm just going to go. And then if there's something really uncomfortable or where I made a bigger kind of faux pas, I'm like, oh, Becca, like I'll write on my little planning sheet, could you edit out, this part? But usually I just go through the episode and I just need, maybe a picture added or a episode reference to pop up, and then the beginning and ending music kind of thing. But even with that minimal amount of time that I've been able to get it down to, it still costs me about, I'd say between $60 and $75 an episode.
Yeah.
So about $240 to $300 a month to do the podcast. So it is very true what they say about podcasting, unless you're in crazy numbers, you're not going to make money doing it. And I knew that going in, it wasn't my intention. But I am always trying to figure out what can I do to bring that cost down so that it's sustainable and I can, I'm still enjoying it and I'm still learning from it. So one of the main things that I do get from that investment, if you will, is the platform structure of the podcast allows me to look at resources and share them. I've always just kind of like grabbed them and held them. And I was like, oh, one day when I start my podcast, I'll have a platform to share these in. So it gives me that consistent place to bring things because I read a lot and I like to share what I learn. So it's very motivating for me to be able to share it, knowing it's free for anybody, anywhere to access it at any time. And that's really what motivated me to do this. And then I also get a lot more done in my own life because it creates accountability. Because if I'm going to celebrate something or share something, I often need the accountability to share what I learned by doing it on the podcast. So that's just some bullet points of some of the things I've learned. I've learned a lot more, but those were like the highlights. And then I wanted to share what my favorite episodes were. If you're a podcast regular and you have a favorite episode, I would love to hear if you would post in episode 100, which is what this episode is, what your favorite episode was and why, like if there was something that resonated with you or that helped you out, gave you an idea for something you could do to make your life a little bit easier. I would love to hear it. If you would be open to sharing that, just post in the comments for this episode. So these are my top 10. These are not in order. They're in order of release. Okay. So from lowest, earliest episode to most recent episode, not in order of my absolute favorite 1 to 10. So we're just playing overall a list of 10. Number 4 is the first one I'm going to highlight, and it was organizing your medicine cabinet. I loved that episode, and I found it so surprising how much effort, number one, it took. I've kept it up now since that episode where I go through my checklist, and it was funny, one of my kids was visiting earlier in the summer and they needed allergy medicine. And I was like, oh, going up to the medicine cabinet. And they actually went up and found it and came down. They're like the checklist on the door, because I have that checklist on the door and I'm not good at necessarily always going in there and kind of writing. I learned that when I used to work in offices, like, oh, you got to keep the supply list. I'm not always good at going in and highlighting things, but I am much better because I have a routine now of every year going and looking at it and then restocking up, especially on that cold and flu medicine in the fall. So things are typically not expired, which is like a really big deal in my house to have things that aren't expired, because there's nothing worse than needing medicine and then realizing this isn't any good anymore. And you don't feel good and you don't want to have to run out to the store. So that was like one of my absolute favorites, and it really surprised me how much I enjoyed it. Okay, the next one is episode number 12, where I talked about visual success journals. And it's still one of my favorite topics. I absolutely adore how taking pictures of successes and wins, and I always share, I just literally print them on my regular color printer, my Epson Eco Tank, which is available. You can see the one I have on my website in the ADHD Friendly shop. Because the ink is so inexpensive, I don't have to think about it. I just print and it comes out perfectly good on regular paper. I cut it and I put it in my visual success journal. And then I can just open it. It's just a binder with pictures, and they're just in sheet protectors. So I can just look at them and immediately connect to that success. And because it's pictures, not words, I don't have to put more effort into reading it to remember. It's like, it's right there. So I love visual success journals, and I talk about how to make yours in episode 12. Episode 23 is my Seinfelding ADHD episode. I thought about that episode for years, literally, and I shared it in my the group I was doing at the time, my Club Palm group, because I just found so many lessons in there.
Yeah.
One of my favorite being Serenity Now.
Serenity.
Where it's just, if you feel yourself getting emotionally dysregulated, it's like, okay, serenity now. It's like a grounding kind of like mantra. So if Seinfeld is a show that resonates with you, I invite you to check out that episode. Episode 29, I talked about Mother's Day and how I never found it to be very ADHD friendly, which I know may not resonate with a lot of people, but it was something I felt really strongly about. The funny thing is, one of my kids, my birthday's in the summer, and one of my kids this birthday, now mind you, that episode was episode 29, so that was like Mother's Day a year and a half ago, like May a year ago. And this birthday, they called me and they're like, so just want to confirm, is it your birthday that you don't celebrate? I was like, no, I still celebrate my birthday. It was Mother's Day that I'm not attached to. So anyway, episode 29, where I talk about Mother's Day and how I don't find it to be ADHD friendly. And then episode 32, I talked about how I learned from an article about Dolly Parton and how she talked about how things, my word here is sparkle, but how to use sparkle to create interest and how Dolly does it in a really seamless way. So episode 32 is where I talk about how Dolly Parton inspired some extra sparkle for me. And then episode 41, Becca, this is so funny because when I was looking at my list, I was like, oh my gosh, I love that episode. And that was pretty much what I was looking for when I went through the list of 100 episodes. I'm like, which ones am I just like, oh, that was so much fun to make, or there was something. 41 was Martha's Month.
Oh, that
where
was a
I
good
talked
one.
about Martha Stewart. I think it was the month of June.
And her
And
calendar.
it was her calendar of things that she did in the month. And it was so comical. And that was another one that I'd held and always intended to talk about because it was so interesting. And I just always wanted to compare what tasks Martha had identified for June and if there was an equivalent to what I could do or could, kind of almost comically do. So I had a lot of fun doing that. And I did. I did the whole month of activities and I kind of tied it to if there was something that I could equate to what Martha was doing, which most of them I could not, but it was really funny. So that was episode 41. Episode 59 was my favorite things episode, and specifically the one from 2022. So the one from last Christmas.
Yeah.
And that was so much fun because we both wore our pajamas and we sat in front of the fireplace, and it was just a lot of fun to do it. And you agreed to be on the episode with me. So that was a lot of fun. So that was, again, episode 59. And then episode 68, this was another one I thought about for a long time and I always wanted to do. I talked about pocket charts and how you can use pocket charts to support your working memory. I shared how I use them a lot in the kitchen to remember the food that I have, because once I put it in the crisper drawer or, lunch meat or whatever, out of sight, out of mind. And it's like a hot, moldy mess. By the time I go back, I'm like, oh my gosh. And I was wasting a lot of food. So I shared how I use pocket charts to plan meals for the week or to remember snacks that I have. So I could just put the little cards in there and visually see it. And remind myself. It would have been something that my dad would have loved, because my dad used to always say, think about what you want before you open the refrigerator, because you're letting all the cold air out. And so he never wanted us just to stand there and look. He wanted us to think about. And it's just so funny because now I'm like, well, now I know that wasn't possible. My brain doesn't do that. I don't know what's in there. I have to look. So pocket charts are a way to see and then decide, instead of kind of going to a default that maybe isn't as healthy of a choice if you remember the healthy things you have available to snack on. So I just shared how I use pocket charts in episode 68. And then episode 71, this is 8 out of 10. So we're getting there. Episode 71, I talked about Costco and all the different ways that I find Costco to be ADHD friendly. And it's not 100% ADHD friendly, but it has so many things that make it ADHD friendly that for me, it's just one of my favorite things. It's one of my favorite things for 2023.
Love
Costco, episode 71. And then in episode 73, I talked about the 4 tendencies, which is based on the work by Gretchen Rubin, and how if you know what your tendency is, you can use it to get more things done with more ease. It all has to do with how you handle internal and external expectations. So if that interests you, I invite you to check out episode 73. Ooh. And then last but not least, number 10, the last one is the most recent one, of course, and that was episode 82, where I talked about chores and ADHD. And the reason I listed this is because that one was actually one I also thought about for a long time, and I really resisted recording it because I have a lot, and I still continue to struggle with a lot of shame around that, and the expectation to have things at a certain level of clean, or how often you're supposed to do things. And those are all kind of hazy, foggy details for me.
Yeah.
And I found that once you hit adulthood, it's almost like I don't want to ask, because then you're afraid of the, you don't know that? How often do you do it? And I'm like, I don't want to answer. I don't want to answer. So I don't talk about it. It's that whole don't ask, don't tell, which creates a lot of resistance and shame. And I know from a lot of my own experiences, but also a lot of clients I work with, it gets in the way of even having social connections, because you're not inviting people over because you don't want people to come inside and see evidence of your struggles. So that was episode 82. If you want to check out just some tips on how to manage chores with ADHD in ADHD friendly ways. Okay. So finally, on this 100th episode, I'm going to share some upcoming changes.
Ooh.
So first, I'm going to share some things that might change, because as I shared earlier, it is a pretty time consuming and labor intensive and financial commitment to do a weekly podcast. But I also know enough about myself to know if I don't continue doing it weekly, I will lose. Like I am very all or nothing when it comes to that. So I'm honoring what I know works for me and trying to find ways to continue doing this in the hopes that it's resonating. It's really one of those things, because you're recording it. It's like you're in a, that saying like, oh, it's like you're in a vacuum and you have no idea. And I really don't. And and that's helpful in some ways, because it lets me keep going and doing my thing without getting negative feedback that would maybe shut me down and stop me from putting myself out there and recording these episodes. But it also is kind of hard motivation wise and energy wise to keep doing it when I don't get a sense that it is helpful. Because if what I'm doing isn't helping, then it's not meeting that desire that I have to do this, so that it is a resource that people can access for free. So one of the things that's hard for me is I get a lot of things that interest me that are sparkly, but I have to kind of put it in the queue because I plan what episodes are coming up. So I'm going to probably be committing to what's coming up next week less often. Not that I'll never say it, but I also might change it. So I might say, okay, this is what I think is going to be next week, but it probably will be more on the spur of the moment what I end up doing, because that just allows me to be more creative and not feel so tied down to, well, I said it's this, so it has to be this.
Yeah.
So that's an area that I notice it opens up and creates more energy for me. So that's definitely something that I'm going to be looking at, just experimenting with. I also might do some kind of like, the topic might be just this week with ADHD, where I read a lot of articles and things where I just might kind of share some highlights and some overall, just kind of like a digest, if you will, of what's the most recent things I've come across and where I found it. So if you want to check it out, or just, kind of get a chance to hear everything that's going on without you having to go out and find it all, I'll just kind of cull it all together and share it in one weekly digest. And then one definite change that we are making, that Becca and I have talked about and decided on, is I'm changing the day of the week the episodes are going to come out. So we've done 100 weeks in a row on Fridays. Fridays are apparently one of the worst days to release a podcast, because people just are not looking to listen to something it's funny because I do, but I get it. For me, it was the easiest day because it was the last day of the week for me to be able to get everything I needed done in the time. So Fridays really work for me for 100 episodes.
Yeah.
But I recognize it may be getting in the way of people finding my podcast if it's not coming out at the time that works for most people who are listening to podcasts or watching podcasts. So we're going to change to Wednesdays. And so that's going to be starting episode 101, which will be coming out on instead of next Friday, which is September 22nd, it will come out the following Wednesday, September 27th. So there will not be a new episode on the 22nd. It will be coming out the following Wednesday, the 27th, and it'll be coming out on Wednesdays. So I just wanted to share that is definitely a change that we're putting in place. And then just changing around a little bit of the other things as we keep moving forward, because I still really do enjoy the structure this provides, and invite you, if you haven't subscribed, if this is at all helpful for you, please do take a minute to subscribe. I know it's one of those things you got to pause, you got to go over, and I resist it in almost every podcast I listen to. So I'm not judging here at all. I totally get that. But if you are motivated and interested in subscribing, I invite you to do that, or to share it with somebody who could benefit from the information that I share. That would help tremendously as well. So again, this is our 100th episode. Becca, I don't think it ended up being shorter. I really thought it was going to be. I don't think it
Get on
was.
the roll.
I
That's-
know.
it's all
I know.
good.
It's all good. Next week, I'm going to be talking about maybe morning habits. Come back next week, which will be Wednesday, the 27th, when that episode
Yes.
will come out. Morning habits, and just some tips on how to maybe put a little bit of an oomph in yours if you are needing a little bit more out of your morning. That's it for this episode of ADHD Friendly. Remember, take what works for you, leave the rest behind. If you haven't started your owner's manual yet, or you're looking for more resources, we watched Star Wars this weekend. I had my husband turn it off because it was the one with Jar Jar, and I can't.
Oh,
Very triggering. I can't stand it. Can't stand you. Costanza. Okay, I'm blending things. If you haven't started your POM, or you're interested in some free resources, or even in joining ADHD Friendly, there's information on my website, adhdfriendly.com. I invite you to check it out, and I hope to see you in our next episode or at adhdfriendly.com. Until next time.